Yeah, yeah, I support you in that. I don't know women very well. I mean, I do have a wife of 32 years, and I do have 2 daughters, and they're educating me still. But, because I'm a guy. But I don't think too many women would take kindly to being interrupted in their social network while they're hanging out with their friends and saying, hey, come here, let me show you off to a bunch of drunk dudes. Right? Yeah, not too cool. Now, we chuckle about that, but some of us Neanderthals are capable of such foolishness. Good thought. Other thoughts? Yes, sir?
He divorced her for disobeying him?
Yeah, if you can't fix it real quick, just dump her, get another one. The heck, right? Kind of cowardly in a sense. Yes?
He made a proclamation to the entire kingdom that just kind of swept over everyone and just said, all women obey your husbands. So he was just kind of not just handling his own problem in that sense, or he wasn't just trying to take care of that problem or whatever. But he was saying that to all people throughout the entire kingdom, that everyone had to obey.
He was now rallying the troops. It's like, all right, this is my way of doing things, that's yours. I got to get more people to agree with me, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and make an edict and get everybody to agree with me. That's what I can do. I'm the king. Yeah. Now, it's a bit extreme, but these things play out every day, with men and women. And I know I'm not tasked with talking about marriage, and I'm certainly no expert on marriage, ask my wife, but I will say this, the thing started off sketchy at first anyway. He was spending a bunch of time showing off himself, and then he decided to show her off to make, try to make himself look better. So he wasn't really very secure in who he was as a man and as a male. And then when, things didn't go Queen Vashti got ticked off, she just man, I'm going on the attack, right? No, I'm not doing that. You can't say that to the king in that culture. So there was a better way to do it. Esther does show us some better ways to handle things later in the book. But it's just interesting to see that these dynamics, though written all these years ago, do play themselves out. So what does that look like today at UNF? If a guy was being like King Xerxes, what would he be doing? We don't want to say it because some of us have probably done it recently. What is it?
Saying inappropriate things about a girl's beauty and or beauty in really inappropriate ways.
Right. So yeah, just like trophy girlfriend type of thing. Not looking past the external packaging, which can be very beautiful and appreciative, and so on and so forth. But yet, just wanting to get a person's own sense of significance from the good looks of the person with. So you're just using the other person. Yes, sir.
Being a Chad.
I'm sorry.
What?
Basically, just being overly cocky and just trying to do something.
Yeah. Check me out, right? Yeah, he's showing his stuff off, right? Maybe you don't have a kingdom to show off, but we can go over to the student, rec center and all the guys working out to look. What do most guys work out on when they work out? Arms and chest. Chest. Having worked in gyms now for 28 years, I'm telling you.
That's what you see.
Yeah, the stuff you see, they can have chicken legs, but if their pants are on, guys have told me that, nobody sees. I'm like, really? Okay. Now, we're laughing about these things, and we should, because it is kind of funny. Chest is a big one. Six-pack abs is a big one, right? I mean, as a personal trainer, no lie, I could not know dirt. Now, as an electrical engineer for almost 10 years, so, you know, I have some level of intelligence. I approach my craft with a high amount of dignity and analysis, but I could be a total idiot. And just because I have six-pack abs, people will listen to me to tell them what to eat, how to work out, and so on and so forth. It's ridiculous, right? But we are fixated, some with the external. Well, I do a little bit of this just to kind of get your attention a little bit and say, to be honest with you, I don't really think most of us, and I've been studying this for a lot of years, have any idea what it means to be a biblical male or female. Now, I don't say that in a condescending way. I say that very humbly because I can spout off information. I'm pretty good at that. But how I live my life consistently, day after day, with whatever my sweet wife Suzanne does or doesn't do, whatever my kids do or don't do, when I can love people for who they are, no matter how bad I feel, now we've moved past left brain regurgitation, cognitive processing, to a little more of right brain motivation, acting out of love and dignity, and possibly out of my unique maleness. I'm just speaking myself, or a woman out of her unique femaleness, instead of having to beat the guys and at their own game and so on and so forth. Be okay with just being who you are, whether male or female, and living out of that strength, and not stereotype it. Like men have to be the leader, and you know, in our house, my wife is a very strong leader. Yes, I've been an AV staff forever. A lot of people see me as the front man, and I've run a company and built it these last 4 years. A lot of people come to me, execs come, and intimate details of their lives with me so I can help them get where they need to get. But she could be running a company. She's a nurse. She works at the UF Infirmary now. She's like a big mom to a bunch of students that she loves. So in different situations, she calls the shots, and in some situations I call the shots, depending on what the strength that is needed in that situation. That's how teams work. But if you're not secure in your maleness or femaleness, it's not going to work. You're going to be like Xerxes and Vashti, right? So how do we define biblical maleness and femaleness without getting into the unfortunate and abusive religious and non-religious stereotypes that have been sold to us for a lot of years? That's a tough one. I was a little scared coming here talking about this tonight, I must say. Because you have an idea of maybe what you think it needs to be, and it might be very opposite of the religious mainstream, or it might be exactly the same as the religious mainstream. But either way, you feel strongly about your idea. Well, I'm going to ask you not to give up your idea at this point, because that would be disrespectful to you. You are intelligent, maturing men and women who are figuring a lot out. And from the conversations I've had with staff and students so far since I've been here, super impressed. Not only that, some large percentage of this university, like you work like 20 hours a week on top of your education. I don't know how many of you are working a bunch, but my sons worked through college and stuff like that. And, I don't think I could have done that when I was an engineering student. I didn't. I worked in the summers. So now I want you to go to Genesis 1. And I want to give you a hint. I didn't come here to top-down spoon feed you. I felt like that was a slight of your dignity. Okay, not that other speakers who just want to come and teach, that's what they're doing. But I know I didn't want to spoon feed you this. Because a year from now, you probably wouldn't remember any of it, right? And you'd still be probably Vashti and, and Xerxes fighting it out. There's a reason why, male-female relationships are very difficult to maintain and mature. And it's not just love Jesus and hope things go well. Because I know lots of religious people who got married in 1987 that are no longer married. Okay? And Suzanne and I, the jury's still out day by day. Okay? She comes from an alcoholic home. I come from a totally dysfunctional family. Sociologists gave us a 15% chance of survival in marriage. We see things extremely opposite. And yet, as we say at our house, if both of us are the same, then one of us is not needed. Guess what? The same thing is true about seeing God. If there were only men, you would not see God clearly, and if there were only women, you would not see God clearly. So we don't have time to go through everything, because I'm going to cover the first 11 chapters of Genesis very quickly. But I want to give you a hint. Whenever you want to tackle a topic that you're interested in, that you don't have any idea about, please don't go talk to your navigator, staff, or your pastor, or your friend before you talk to God. First things first. C.S. Lewis, I'll paraphrase for you, say, put first things first and second things follow. Put second things first and you lose both. My heart for you is that you don't lose. Too often we go for the easy route instead of trusting God in His promise when He says, call to me and I'll answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things that you do not know. So but I do want to give you a hint. One hint would be, look at what Jesus said on the topic. And the second hint would be, look at Genesis chapter 1 through 11, because it's many theologians believe it's the foundation of the rest of the Bible. Okay? I can't authoritatively say yes or no because I'm not a theologian, but I do know there's a lot of good stuff in Genesis 1 through 11 that sets the stage for a lot of what comes next. Jesus quoted Deuteronomy more than any book in the Bible. Kind of fascinating thought. When I was talking with Jim Downing one day, I said, Jim, how do you get a good picture of God? He said, spend a year in Deuteronomy. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. For many years, dare I say a couple decades, I split that statement into two statements. God created us in His own image. Okay, end of thought. Male or female, He created them? Oh yeah, I got that, yes. But what if they're tied together? What if a man is the male image bearer of God and the woman is the female image bearer of God? What if those qualities together give us a clearer picture of God? And what, since we know from Scripture that God lives in us through Jesus, that maleness and femaleness comes out in both men and women. Maybe not equally. I dare say not equally. But can a dad be nurturing to his kids? But yet culturally we associate nurturing with who? Women. And men typically portrayed on TV as bumbling idiots, which we can be. Don't get any love. But, it is what it is. So, that's my first thought, is if you're a male image bearer, if you're a man, and a female is a female image bearer, a good or a bad one, what are you portraying of God? And how do we know what even to pray for? right? So it's really interesting. If you go into the original language for Hebrew and that male and female, this is where it first shows up in the Bible, so I thought that was a good place to start, right? You get the word zakar, which primarily means three things. It's very interesting. To make an impact, to remember and do. Now, fascinating thing, if you've ever read through the Old Testament, okay, how often does the word remember get used? A lot. So intimacy in a relationship is knowing and being known, right? So you get to know someone and they get to know you and you're growing in intimacy. God wants us to get to know Him. He knows us. But He's always saying, remember this, remember this. What is He usually saying, remember? Yeah, He's like saying, remember me, remember what I've done, so on and so forth. And we can spend a lot of time going through that, right? The interesting thing about the female word there, and I am not trying to be offensive in any way, but it's pictorial in nature. And I have a fairly provocative statement I'm going to make about this. I'm not saying it authoritatively. I'm saying it's something to consider about maleness and femaleness from God's perspective. Okay? The word there, which I can't pronounce, essentially means punctured or bored through. And the only time that Hebrew word is used again is in 2 Kings 12, when I get the kings mixed up, but anyhow, you can look in 2 Kings 12. It's insignificant which king it is, but when he was rebuilding the temple, he made a collection box to collect money because it took money to rebuild it, and the opening that they had to put the money through to go in the box was the same word as female. Now this is fascinating the more you think about it, okay? From your experience of knowing God and reading the Bible, does God just do anything random? You know, he's pretty ordered, and how many times have you seen something in the spiritual realm, metaphored, if that's a word, in the physical realm? All right. Maintain that thought for a second. Go to Genesis 3. Am I boring you with some of this technical stuff? I can be kind of a geek, engineer geek sometimes, but if you'll hang with me, I promise we're about to get a little more excited. Okay? And we're having a little fun in the process, but it may just blow your mind. Okay? So, Genesis chapter 3. When Adam and Eve give God the finger and rebel. Okay? Right? Isn't that what they do, right? God says, don't eat from the tree. They're like, but the tree looks good. I'm going to get all this great knowledge. I'm going to be like God. Basically, bam, gives them the finger, eats from the tree, and all hell breaks loose, literally. Right? Now, see, it's interesting. I could have said they sinned, right? And that would have appealed to your intellect. But giving God the finger, and maybe there's a better analogy, that is more the feeling, the humiliation of what it means to rebel against God, to defy this almighty, awesome God. And when I'm with my buddies and we're talking about it, it's like somebody crapping on your front lawn. Only Adam and Eve, and we do it on His throne. So not to get overly graphic, but we've got to get a sense that when we do our own thing like Adam and Eve did in Genesis 3, it's an assault on the majesty of God. It's not just a sin. You are assaulting the greatness of a beautiful king because we think we know better or because we're afraid. So what's the first thing Adam and Eve do? How do they hide? Or maybe a better question is, what do they hide?
They're like private areas.
Their private parts, right? Isn't that interesting? I'm feeling something I've never felt before. Some would submit to you shame. You know, now I've rebelled against God. There's something wrong with me. I've done something wrong. They're feeling guilt. Shame is I've done something wrong. Guilt is, guilt is I've done something wrong. Shame is I am something wrong. Right? There's something wrong with me. I'm not lovable. I'm not this. I'm not that. I'm broken. Okay? So the first thing they do is they hide their private parts. What do you think that is? Any thoughts? Yeah, there's a certain vulnerability there. Once you're afraid, once you're, quote, hung out to dry, you're looking for self-protection, so you're going to cover things up, right? It gets pretty interesting when you start thinking about it, when you really are starting to get honest about it. If you spend the time to really study the topic of biblical maleness and femaleness, now is when I'm going to start to get a little more provocative and blow your mind a little bit, okay? The Hebrew words imply for men to rise up, to enter strongly into the environment, and to release something that's alive in them to bring about God's purposes in someone else. And for the female, I hope I'm embarrassing you all now. If you have the time to go and study it, and I hope you do one day, you'll see it implies receiving, giving a taste of the goodness of God for the benefit of the other person. That potentially the genitalia of men and women was a metaphor made by God to show us their maleness and femaleness, how it should be lived out relationally. Now, whether you think that's all just a bunch of garbage or whatnot, okay, that's fine. I am telling you, though, that the Hebrew word remember, rise up, and as you go through the entire scripture and look at the men and women, the way God commended men and women, what you usually see them doing when they were commended, men were usually being commended for remembering what God had said, doing what God wanted. And to do that, they had to exercise gentle strength. Gentle strength. Have you ever seen gentle strength? You might not have. The two words are often not put together. Gentle strength. A biblical man remembers what God has said to do what God wants him to do. And he does it with strength and gentleness, and he has something alive in him that he can give out in the process. Biblical female is warm and inviting to give a taste of God. So one is the incarnational expression of God, one is the invitational expression of God. So, working in gyms can be interesting, right? You go into the locker room, and all you have to do is look someone in the eye and say, hey, how's it going? And people will just tell you their life story right then and there. I'm serious. It's really interesting. Because no one is given the time of day. A lot of times when I'm walking into the gym, the dudes often look away, but the women tend to look down a lot. What's that saying? I don't feel safe. 6 times a second, from a neuroscience standpoint, your right brain subconsciously is trying to answer the question. It's the second question it's trying to answer. Is this person good, bad, or scary? 6 times a second. You don't even know what's happening. First question it's trying to answer, right brain, the relational side of the brain is trying to answer, is anyone happy to see me? Do you know every day, I'm kind of a simple creature, every day when I see my wife and kids, no matter what's going on, I try my best to answer that first question. I am so, hey, KK, how's it going? Hey, so-so, how's it going? Hey, honey, how's it going? Run up, hug her, kiss her, that kind of thing. All right? Because 6 times a second, it's getting asked. And I don't want them answering, dad or husband is bad or scary. So now, I've just opened Pandora's box. You're going to walk away with a lot more questions that you're going to have answers for. But if it's true, what's essential for a biblical man to have? Humility, so that would go along with the gentle part, right? The ability to not be like King Xerxes and try to boss everybody around. It's interesting, another core principle, when God doesn't say a lot on a topic, what he does says is usually the core of the topic. So if you go to like 1 Peter 3, and you can turn there if you want. What time do you guys finish up? We're about done?
You're playing catch.
Okay. I'll play a little bit, okay? Go to 1 Peter chapter 3, and what does it tell husbands to do? No, that would be Ephesians. Okay, what does in 1 Peter 3 say? This is at the end of Peter's life. He's much more mature now. Okay? Okay? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Understanding the way, honoring to the woman as a weaker vessel.
Okay, so understanding and honoring. Okay? Was there anything that King Xerxes did in that picture there where he was trying to understand Vashti's point of view or needs? Not a single time. What about honoring her? Who was he too busy honoring? Right. If you ever watch men and women relate, like single men and women too, not a whole lot of honoring of the other person. It's all about trying to make yourself look good for the other person, which is honoring self. That's not biblical male. That's egotistical male. That's utilitarian male, right? It's useful. I've got to, we guys generally, we like to conquer and capture things. We like the thrill of the hunt, right? So, we try to make ourselves look good and, show the best part of ourselves and talk about our credentials and all that good stuff, Not very biblical male. Understanding means I have to get to know you, to understand you. And I have to often say in humility, which I do all the time with my wife and daughters, I hear what you're saying, can you elaborate on that? Because I don't have a clue what they're saying at that moment. It's not that they're not highly intelligent, multiple degrees, stuff like that. It's that I'm a man, and the coded language that was presently being used, like, there's no peanut butter in the cupboard. I'm like, okay, there's no peanut butter. Instead, what it meant was, I'd like you to go get some peanut butter. I'm like, if you want me to get peanut butter, just tell me to go get peanut butter. Right? But that's not how her brain was working at that moment. That's not how my brain was working. So you see so now it's like, okay, there's no peanut butter in the cupboard, honey. Do you need me to go get some? I'm starting to understand. Starting to honor her desire. Okay, instead of, what the heck? We're out of peanut butter. Who cares? Sun comes up, just eat something else. Doesn't work like that. All right. Female. Woo, females. What would it look like to be warm and receptive to give people a taste of God. Because God's pretty warm, right? You know, we have the prodigal son story, right? All you got to do is come back, and he's got open arms. He embraces. He receives him. He gives him a taste of the goodness of God, his son, right then and there. So, what is a way that we can appropriately, as you as women, can communicate warmth and invitation that's appropriate for someone to get a good taste of God? Simple things. Not jumping to assumptions like all men are pigs. Most of us are. Okay? But once there's trust and safety developed, maybe not. That's kind of an extreme one. But how about looking someone in the eye? It's interesting, I think, gross generality, just my personal experience, I'm just one man, right? I see a lot of women, they'll look away a lot. Now, it could be because I represent a threat, okay? Threat may be I might remind them of their crappy dad, I might remind them of something, I don't know what. But anyhow, that's okay. I'm not faulting them. But the eyes play a role in invitation. And like, I trust you enough to where I'm willing to be appropriately open with you. Okay? What might be something else?
Smile?
Smile. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my wife knows no strangers. She's hugging everybody all the time. I know some people aren't comfortable with that. Women aren't comfortable with that. But that's very invitational. You come to our home, you could be brand new walking in the door. Sometime that night you're getting a big hug. Sometimes it's at the door, sometimes it's after the meal, but you're getting hugged. And that's communicating, I think you're special. I will open myself up to you. So, these are little things that actually are super big things. We're always looking for like the spectacular. We're a spectacular, addicted society, right? We're obsessed with celebrities, with sports stars. Hey, I'm into it some too, so I'm not throwing any stones, okay? But everybody wants to like share the Bible verse or do this or do that. You'd probably be better off just sending that message to people's brain that you're not bad or scary, that you care enough to give them a smile. That might be the only smile they see all day. Let me tell you, if your smile is the only smile they see all day, they'll remember that at the end of the day. It will somehow stimulate something about God in them. Because you are a female image bearer. Men, okay? You guys are getting beat up pretty good these days in society, and unfortunately, a lot of times we deserve it. The thought about rising up and being strong and remembering what God has told you and moving out into the world to contribute something of yourself to it taps into your core terror that I don't matter, I am weightless. That's a man's core terror. Women, take note of that when you get married, okay? Because you're going to deal with it all the time. Your core terror is that I don't matter. So where do men focus their attention? Back to Genesis 3, right? God cursed the ground. What was the man's job? Work the ground, produce from the ground. Why did God curse that?
They couldn't just take from it. They had to work for what they got.
Well, work became much harder the same way, unfortunately, child labor and delivery became for women. been through it 5 times. Makes me very glad I'm a man. It was brutal. So I have great compassion for women. Delivery is tough. My wife was a trooper. She just kept going through it, and I'm like, man. He cursed the ground. It was actually a blessing for us. He cursed our most important relationships for women, cursed their most important relationships as a blessing. Why? So that men would have to turn to God to finish the job, and so that women would have to turn to God to relate well with their closest relationships, because the natural tendency is to not. The natural tendency, and what do guys usually do when they're fighting with their wives? They go work. They just, I worked as an engineer for years. I'd see guys at the office all the time and say, why are you here still? It's late. Like, I want to go home. Yeah, happens a lot. I can tell you right now, Suzanne and I have a big fight. First thing I'm thinking is, what's a job I can do? I can control that. I understand it. Could it be that it's built in, that the curse again starts to point to our maleness and our femaleness? Women focus on relationship typically more. Men tend to focus more outside the house. Women tend to focus more inside the home. Not that women can't be top CEOs, they are, and they focus very well in their home. But as you study CEOs of major corporations, men and women, they lead very differently. They lead uniquely male and female. It's pretty fascinating. So men, what's the big rap against men nowadays? What are you hearing on the streets? What's that? Okay, so they try to dominate women instead of understanding them. They just try to take advantage of sexual assault, date rape, huge on campus. I would say, women, as I would say to my own daughters, don't put yourself in that position at any point. If there's drinking going on, like I forget, like 80% of dates, 80 or 90% or 95% of date rapes have alcohol involved. Even if you're friends, if someone's drinking, you can't be alone. Just don't do it. Don't even give it an opportunity. That's just a side note. So, predators. What else?
Bully.
Bully? Really? Ladies, you experiencing a lot of bullying from men? Catcalls, so it's more of that kind of thing. It's more of that inappropriate humiliation gesture, like I'm just a package, or something. What else about guys? To be honest with you, I see women bullying more than men nowadays.
Cause of all the world's problems. White women are the cause of all the world's problems.
Yeah? Yeah, I would say probably the biggest one I hear on the streets is wimps, not being leaders. And I coined a phrase that I heard back when I was on campus, because I had been on campus for 25 years, so I got to watch 25 freshman year classes come in. I said, women are becoming the men they always dreamed of. Now, that's a sweeping, gross generality, but the guys were becoming so wimpy, and the women were, these are sweeping generalities, so don't take offense, maybe it's too late, okay? But what I observed in my limited scope of things, I'm watching men be total wusses, wimpy, not strong, not rising, not standing up for anything, not fighting for anything or anyone. Not all of them, of course. Maybe none of the men in this room. But this is what's being said, and this is what's being observed, right? And now we have gender smearing going on nationwide. We got media picking up on it and putting it in all the new shows. And so it's very confusing. But if this biblical maleness thing is true, and like I said, just looking at Genesis 1 and Genesis 3, there's strong hints of it there. You know, men need to learn to remember what God promised. You know, if you're not spending time in the promises of God, or at least writing them down when you come across them in your other reading and stuff like that, I don't know how you make it in this world. because this world is pretty hopeless. It just gets worse and worse. Sorry to be a bummer, right? But it does. But when I see the promise of God, and I've got children that are making some really bad decisions, and I'm looking at this promise that says, I will pour out my spirit on your offspring and my blessing on your descendants. And I'm like, Lord, I hope that by the time I die, they can work their way out of this. I'm going to believe your promise. So then I remember what God says, and then I treat them like the promise dictates, because that's what God said. And I keep engaging into their lives, even when I want to pull away, because I'm so hurt by the prodigal nature that I myself possessed and exercised at their age. Life is like that. So, for your I have tons of books you can read. I would much prefer you to study your Bible, but I just wanted to introduce those thoughts. If I can encourage you to do one thing, men, I encourage you to initiate more. Take the lead, even if you totally screw up. And take the lead in relating to other people. Men are terrified of intimacy because they can't figure it out. We just have a hard time with it. Like true intimacy. Like exposing how you're feeling. Like I had to go look up the major feelings to even know what they were. The only feeling I knew was pissed off. You know, that was it. You know, I'm happy or I'm pissed off. One or the other. There wasn't a whole lot in between. Okay? That's not expressive enough. That's not understanding enough, and it's going to frustrate any woman in your life, because how is she going to determine why? She's usually going to think, well, is he mad because of me? Did I do something wrong? You know, or whatnot, or just get frustrated and be like, hey, just figure it out, you know? And so I want you guys to initiate, to believe that there's something good in you to offer. Because remember, what's the most common command in the Bible?
Remember.
No, I haven't said it yet. It's not remembered. Do you know what the greatest command is in the Bible? The one that's most often said?
Love.
No? Not even close. But that is the most important one. Love God, love people. Do not fear. It's commanded more times than any other command in the entire Bible. Okay? So, man's core terror, weightlessness. Women's core terror is invisibility. If I let you in, you will not see me, you will not understand me, you will not honor me, and even worse, you'll violate me in some way. So you have that core terror in place. You can get that from Genesis 3. You may not. You may say Andy's crazy, and that's fine. But study it, look at the original language, you'll start to see some of those things become more clear. So those are the fears that are working against you. So if you fear invisibility, what do? You withdraw. If you withdraw, you don't invite, right? If it's, I am weightless, that's what you're feeling, that's what you're telling yourself, then what are you not going to do? You're not going to rise up, you're not going to initiate, you're not going to lead, you're just going to be away. Okay? That's it. So, man, I'd like to see initiate more. Take personal responsibility. Go ahead and fail, okay? Who cares? You're going to fail anyway. So you might as well have fun doing it. Okay? It's true. That race, that picture you saw when I was all smiles, that was an epic fail for me. Yes, I did finish, but I finished it 5.5 hours after my goal. That's an epic fail in my type A personality. Okay, all my friends are like, "Hey, you ran 100 miles, you're awesome, blah, blah." I'm like, I could have run it 5 hours faster. That's okay. That's what kind of keeps me going. I love this stuff. I don't beat myself up for it, but for me, it's like, it's a fail. But it was still a win. because I love my friends. I had a worker come up to me and say, "You're the happiest runner I saw on the course all day." My goal was to reflect God. So in that sense, I was a huge success. Okay? I only say that to say, these are the games you play within your own mind. Just giving you examples. Giving you dirt on me, since you don't know me from Adam. I figured I'll give you more dirt on me than I have on you, so then you can get me back if I ever do anything to you. Okay? And women, use your eyes, smile, give people a taste of the goodness of God. A smile goes a long way in people's lives. A hugely long way. And I think all of you could do that. I know you're busy, I know you have a lot of demands, but I think you can look at someone and smile. Guys, I'm a little harder on you because I want to see you take personal responsibility for this world we live in. Now remember, in Genesis chapter 1, he told men and women to rule. Okay, so I'm not saying only men should rule, but I think men are behind right now, in my personal opinion. Okay? And I don't like that, because you guys are better than that. Now, you personally may be way ahead of the curve, way ahead of me, and that's totally fine. Probably are. But I'm saying, you're going to be dealing with a lot of guys out there that have withdrawn to action movies, video games, and maybe more devious forms of escape. Okay? It's rampant. There's a reason for that. That core terror right now is winning the battle. So we need to be in prayer. If we have men friends, we need to pray that they would understand that if they have Christ, they are strong, that they could fulfill whatever purposes God has for them, no matter how bad the odds are against them. David and Goliath, the whole 9 yards. And for men, for women, instead of flirting, teasing, whatever, help them to feel safe and to not feel invisible. Because that's what they're dealing with internally, whether they know it or not. That they are important for who they are on the inside, and that we're very grateful for what's on the outside. Okay? Sorry, no earth-shaking, big Bible teaching type thing. I've introduced a couple thoughts to you. I'm going to hang around if you have any more detailed questions. I have a ton of material on this stuff, so if you have any thoughts or questions, I'd be happy to throw out a few other things for consideration. I don't care how much you know. What I care about if I came back a year from now, what I saw you doing. Tell my clients that all the time. I don't care how much you know. It's what you consistently do, come hell or high water, and the reasons you do it that matter most. What you know is window dressing. You gotta know something, right? It's all window dressing. Thanks very much, guys. I'll have you know my testosterone levels just went up. I don't get applauded that often, so